Okay, welcome everybody. For those that haven't signed in, please sign in. There's a link on the agenda as well as the chat. The first item is call to order. Holly, do you want to go through the list?
This is Holly. Sure thing. All right. Representing CCI, Steve Marino, Mike Wallace, or Mary Madrigal.
Mike Wallace is on the phone.
Representing CML, Megan Dollar. Representing the accessibility community, Cheryl Garcia. Representing at large, Matthew Ruggles or Luke Adams. Representing the VESP, Tim Kunkelman.
Good morning, Holly. I am on.
Also representing VESP, Mary Jane Rasher.
Yes, I'm on the phone. Thank you.
Representing ILEX, Wes Horn, and Darla Joseph. Representing Wireless, Patrick.
And Holly Westhorn is on the call. I see him. Darla told me she would be late.
Yes. Thank you, Daryl. Here.
Representing also Wireless, Monica Aiken.
Yes, I'm on the phone. Thank you.
Representing CLEX to the VoIP, Ray Paddock or Lindsay Carr.
Yep, this is Ray Paddock. Delighted to be here this morning.
Also representing CLEX or VoIP, Jay Slater or Erica Stevens. Representing 911, Daniel Calderon or Susan Myers. Jeremy Duncan or Jennifer Kirkland.
Jeremy Duncan is present.
Kimberly Colt, Val Turner, or Tracy Oldemeyer.
This is Kimberly, and I'm present.
Jackie Reynolds or Amy Bush.
This is Jackie. I'm on the call.
Beth Dobransky.
Beth Dobransky, present.
Valicia Librand or Paula Null.
Valicia Librand is here.
Valicia, thank you. Jeff Irvin.
Jeff Irvin's here.
Connie Johnson.
Okay, go ahead.
Connie Johnson's here.
Deanie Shen or Shannon Brend.
I'm here. Deanie.
Andrew Dameron or Jennifer Schwartz.
Jennifer Schwartz is here.
Vicki Pickett, sorry.
That's okay. Vicki Pickett's here.
Tina Bonetta or Scott Newman.
Morning, Holly. Scott Newman's here.
Sean Shear or Brandy Seaton.
Sean Shear's here.
Mandy Stolzmeyer or Matt Gaish.
Matt here. Mandy won't be attending.
Carl Stevens, Tom Holman, or Monica Million.
Carl Stevens is on the phone.
Patty West or Christine Mason.
Patty West is on.
And Holly, I think you missed Danette Martin, but she is on the call. I see her in the attendee list. Row 22.
Good morning. I'm here. Thanks, Daryl.
Thank you. All right, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. And once again, for those that weren't called, please sign in on the link on the chat. Next item is, and this is Carl, approval of minutes from March 2021. Can I get a motion to approve, or are there any changes?
Jeff Irvin, so moved.
This is Vicky Pickett, a second.
Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you. Next item is committee member vote, wireless carrier vacancy.
This is Daryl. Was that just left over from last time? Because I think that position's been filled now.
Okay, that may have been. And then the next item is standing reports. There are several written reports, but Daryl, go ahead with a few staff update.
This is probably the longest standing report I've ever written, so I won't go through all of it, but I'll just give you the highlights. 911 grant update. Payments still continue to go out smoothly. Holly, do you have anything that you'd like to talk to the group about as you've been managing the administrative side of those grants?
This is Holly. No, not really. I would just say go to the 911 grant website before you submit your paperwork, because it provides step-by-step details of how to do it.
And I'll send the link out in a little bit of for that grant page for those who have not submitted their grant paperwork yet. PUC proceedings. When I said that by the time of the task force meeting, the commission will have concluded the rulemaking to implement rules consistent with the changes made to the 911 section of Colorado statute by House Bill 20-1293. That is not quite accurate. We are not done yet, but we are expecting a recommended decision to come out of the ALJ's office fairly soon. And then once that recommended decision moves forward, then it'll be sent to the unless the commission chooses to hold that up, it'll go to the Attorney General's office, or Secretary of State's office, excuse me. We are going to have separate rulemakings later this year on the topic of 911 network resiliency. I plan on actually starting that as soon as this current rulemaking is complete. We'll start with a workshop to get people's input on what they would like to see in the 911 network resiliency section, get general direction, and then we'll follow up with that with a set of draft rules for a working group to look at prior to the commission actually publishing those as proposed rules. I do want to call attention to the fact that Lumen recently made their annual contingency plan filing. That filing is required every April 30th. Every 911 governing body is encouraged to take a look at that filing to make sure that the information in that filing for their 911 PSAPs is accurate. And the proceeding number for that is 18M-0294T. It's in the standing report document. So if you forget later, you can look at the standing report document and get that. If you look that up in our e-filing system, you can get the redacted version of the most recent copy of the contingency file that was planned. FCC proceedings, there's quite a bit going on with this. We're still waiting on the FCC to issue final rules based on their notice of proposed rulemaking for 911 fee diversion. We are also waiting to hear what they have to say about the 911 fee diversion strike force and who's going to be on that strike force. The FCC also recently issued new rules based on an earlier notice of proposed rulemaking they did on the network outage reporting system and disaster information reporting system. That's NORS and DERS. Those are basically the telecommunications outage reporting system that is run by the FCC. The earlier notice of proposed rulemaking proposed giving states and sub-state political entities like cities and counties access, if they apply, access to read information in NORS and DERS. These new rules do give the ability for states and local governments to do that, but the date for implementation of that is September of 2022. So we still have a ways to wait before we have access to that information. There's an NPRM that recently came out on further strengthening emergency alerting. There's a link to that NPRM in the standard report. There's a press release with an announcement that the FCC is going to be conducting an inquiry into several wireless providers' compliance with FCC rules that require them to start delivering 911 callers vertical location information by April 3rd of 2021. A link to that press release is in the standing document. And there is a new proposed rulemaking issued on April 22nd to improve 911 reliability. A link to the full NPRM can be found in the standing document. Some of the proposed rules requiring originating service providers to notify PSAPs of 911 impacting outages within the same time frames, which is as soon as possible, but no later than 30 minutes, as covered 911 service providers. So we're basically putting the same requirements on originating service providers that are on what we in Colorado would call our BESP. That's the 911 system service provider. Make changes to the information that service providers must include in their notifications to PSAPs to make them more useful and actionable. Require OSPs to update contact information for the purpose of making outage notifications at least annually. I think all of the major carriers are already doing that, but this would make it a requirement. Requires OSPs to notify customers within 60 minutes of 911 outages by putting the notification in easy access of their websites. And possible change of 911 reliability certifications from annual to less frequent intervals, such as every 2 years. Right now, every covered 911 service provider must file an annual 911 reliability report with the FCC. Those reports are confidential. We don't have access to them. The state does not have access to them, but the FCC presumably reviews these reports to make sure that 911 reliability is getting better over time rather than worse. And the proposal is to change that annual filing requirement from 1 year to something less frequent. Federal legislation. I won't go through all of this. On House Resolution 1848, that is the Lift America Act. As a lot of you know, there is a provision within that act, it's buried within it because it's a very large bill, to create a $15 billion grant program for states to spend on next generation 911 infrastructure projects. It's not clear from how it's written right now whether Colorado would qualify for grants under that program, and part of it hinges on what the FCC does with their 911 fee diversion rules, because states that are determined to be spending 911 surcharge fees on things that are not deemed allowable by the FCC, those states would not be eligible for grant funding. So it's not clear yet whether Colorado is eligible, but we want to make sure that we are eligible to the extent that we can. Rather than get into a lot of this, there's information about the bill in the standing report, but I would also really encourage everyone, if you have not done so yet, to register for 911 Goes to Washington on the NENO website. That event has already passed, but you can still watch it recorded, and they did a really good job from multiple perspectives, kind of analyzing this bill, describing what's good about it, what is not so good about it, and what NENA would like to see changed about it, as well as some perspective from other industry players like ICERT and NASNA on the bill. So if you've not done that, I would really encourage you to do it. It's free, so it's really the best way for you to get caught up on what's happening with that grant program. There's another bill that was brought to my attention. Thank you, Carl. Senate Bill 515 is the Mental Health Justice Act of 2021, and it would create a grant program for training mental health professionals as first responders. And included in what the funding can be used for is training dispatch personnel just on handling, on proper handling of mental health related calls. So to the extent that this might turn into a grant program that could be used in part for 911 training, it's something that I'd like to keep track of. So that's why it's been added to the standing report. State legislation, there's a whole lot in here. I've kept this up to date. Even after writing my standing report, I've gone in and updated it multiple times as the latest actions on these different bills have changed. Just to kind of give some overview, the 911 nurse intake program, nurse intake trial program, which has been a big topic, has continued to move forward. It has most recently, just 2 days ago, it passed its second reading in the Senate with no additional amendments, so it's probably going to go to the House next. Senate Bill 154 has passed the Senate. That's the 988 surcharge bill, and it has been introduced into the House now, so we'll see where that goes. They have, interestingly enough, created an enterprise agency in the bill that would then, so that the PUC would still be collecting that surcharge, but would be then handing it over to an enterprise, which would then determine how to spend it.
Daryl?
Yes.
This is Holly. I'm sorry. Would you mind blowing up your screen just a little bit so we can read what's on the shared screen? Thank you.
I just like seeing people squint in their camera views. OCC sunset, this is one that has kind of taken a turn. So every so often, and the number of years varies depending on the agency. Every state agency and program has to go through a sunset process where it's reviewed by the legislature, and the legislature just determines whether it wants to keep the program with modifications or let the program expire. And the OCC is the Office of Consumer Counsel, and I think most of you were around in 2014 when the Office of Consumer Counsel lost the statutory authority to intervene in telecommunications matters at the Public Utilities Commission. The new sunset bill that's going through right now that renews the OCC's authorization to be a state agency actually gives the OCC authority to intervene in any state proceeding that they want to, not just at the PUC, but at any state agency. So obviously that also means that they would potentially be coming back into telecommunications matters after a several-year hiatus on that. Implementation of the state 911 surcharge, the new flat rate generated, this is the flat rate prepaid wireless 911 surcharge, generated $982,000 in the first month of its collection. That is a 417% increase over the previous month, and that's from going from a 1.4% per transaction rate to a flat rate of $1.38 per transaction. The March distribution was $976,000. Just yesterday, I received the report for April, and it was a little over $1 million. So this is producing a lot more revenue that is all being distributed back to the 911 governing bodies based on wireless call volume. It's a lot more than we had really expected. So I've been asked by DOR a couple of times, is this what we expected? And frankly, we didn't know because we didn't have good information about how many of those transactions were taking place across the state. But the fact that it stayed like this for 3 months and is in fact going up, I don't expect it to go down again. I believe this is going to be the new normal for the prepaid wireless 911 surcharge revenues. The state 911 surcharge generated only $137,000 in its first full month, which was well below projections, but it generated $896,000 in its second month, which was above projections. Projections are about $520,000 per month. We believe that it was low in the first month because of low compliance, and it was high in the second month because of companies playing catch up. There are still a number of companies that are still not remitting the way they're supposed to. So as more companies catch up, we expect that possibly this month will be high as well. And the funds on that should be coming out in a couple of days. It usually comes out around the middle of the month. So we'll have in just a couple more days, we'll have an idea of whether it's going to be high this month as well. We are currently in the process of conducting interviews. Actually, we've completed the interviews and we're doing some background checks for the new 911 auditor position. unfortunately don't have more information at this time, but hopefully fairly soon we will, and definitely by the next task force meeting I'll be able to introduce, hopefully, I say definitely and then hopefully, 99% sure that by the time of the next task force meeting we will be able to introduce that new 911 auditor position to you. Emergency telephone charge deadline reminders. Just as a reminder, the new telephone, the new statute that went into effect last year requires that new emergency telephone charge rates go into effect either February 1st or June 1st. And there is a 60-day notification period required for the carriers, which means that if you have not already sent notification out to the carriers that your charge is going up by June 1st, you're too late. So your next opportunity will be February 1st. And in order to do that, you have to get notification out to the carriers by October 31st, which would be 60 days. And if you have to file an application with the commission, then you need to tack on at least 30 days onto that as well, because there's a 30-day public notice period that's required for any application that comes before the commission. So just be aware of those and keep those in mind. So if you are planning on increasing your emergency telephone charge next year, you can start planning towards those dates. And that was a lot of information crammed in a very small space. So if anybody has any questions for me, I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, thank you.
This is Carl. Daryl, thank you very much for not only the report, but keeping on top of all that stuff. That's very helpful. Our next item is the BESP report, Lumen.
Hi, this is Tim. I do not have anything to report out for today.
Thank you. Entrado.
Thank you, Carl. I don't have anything today either.
Thank you. Next item is Agenda Committee. Back to Daryl.
Not much to say here other than to tell you that our speaker for today's meeting will be Mark Collier with Secure Logics. We'll be talking about telephone denial of service, which is a very timely topic right now. In April, we had a special lunch and learn. That was, I believe, our first lunch and learn on our off month. We plan to continue scheduling those moving forward as long as there's an interest. We had been looking at a GIS data validation panel for a June lunch and learn. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that organized in time for that. We are looking at another possibility for a lunch and learn in June. And the July speaker is also something in flux right now. So I talked about the State Archivist Office. I've been having trouble getting a hold of them, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to get them in, but I do have other speakers lined up to talk to the task force, either as part of a meeting like today or as part of a lunch and learn in one of our off months. But as always, if you have any topics or speakers you would like to recommend for the task force meetings or the lunch and learns, please just send me a quick email letting me know, and I'll follow up with that. Thank you.
This is Carl. Daryl, thank you very much for the report. Next item is Bylaws Committee. There's no change or modification recommended for the bylaws. So our next item is Legislative Committee. Jackie Louise.
I do not see her on the call.
Okay. I know they had a meeting, I believe, Tuesday. I wasn't on that. Daryl, do you have anything from that?
No, I can just quickly summarize. There was a tribute to 911 telecommunicators that was read on the floor of the General Assembly. Monica did a good job getting all that information out to everybody, as well as Jackie. We got some good pictures. There were some telecommunicators there to represent the community for that tribute. And since then, Jackie has continued to hold meetings every other week, including this week. And we've been looking at some potential cleanup items for the 911 funding section of the statute to clean up items from the bill that passed last year. but I don't have anything further to report on that.
This is Carl. Daryl, thank you very much. Next item is Equal Access Committee. Cheryl Garcia, I believe Holly, she wanted you to give the report since Phil is gone.
So this is Holly. The only thing for that was just a mention of the April meeting, the Let's Talk initiative. Lori G came to present at the Access Subcommittee on the Let's Talk initiative, which is essentially for folks with speech disabilities are able to request and use decals and data that allows 911 responders to understand if they have any type of specific accessibility needs. And then additionally, Holly, myself, presented to the ESINet yesterday regarding the text to 911 memo about the potential of adding text to 911 to the ESINet as a permanent function. And there was discussion on whether that's the best route to go or if there's other options for implementing statewide text to 911 that would not require the ESINet, but would still be accessible for everybody in Colorado. The May meeting for the Accessibility Committee is canceled, and the next meeting will be June 24th. And that's all I have for that. You're welcome, Cheryl.
This is Carl. Thank you, Holly, and thank you, Cheryl, for doing all that work. Next item is Outage Committee. Daryl.
So I'll give a brief overview of where we're at so far this year. For this date, compared to previous years, we are equal with last year. We are down from 28 in 2019. We had 4 basic emergency service outages by this date. So far, we have 3. These include closed outages only. So if there's still outages that are still being investigated, those don't go into that count. And 3 of those occurred in January. We had none in February, and we had 1 in March. And we just received another one. I just received another one early this morning that we'll be following up on as well. Looking at other statistics, the average duration of the outages has been high so far this year. Of course, the sample number is very small, so that can skew the results if you have just one outage that takes a very long time. But we'll be watching that, and hopefully we'll see that go back down. Average customer count has actually been very low compared to last year. So that's, while the duration's been higher, the size of the outages have been smaller. Customer outage impact measured in customer minutes, that's number of customers affected multiplied by the minutes of the outage duration. That's actually lower so far this year than it was last year. And this is total, so you can't really tell where this is going to end up until after the year is over, this one that I'm hovering over right now. So it is obviously lower than 2020, but that could simply because we're not even halfway through the year yet. The types of outages we've had so far, so of the 3 that we've had so far, 2 have been full outages, 1 was an alley outage. And then the causes of the outages, this is 2016 year to date, but over here is just for 2021. Of the 3 outages we've had, 2 were accidental cable cuts, 1 was an unknown cause. Frequently that happens if there's an outage and then the equipment resets itself before the technician gets there to fix it, which makes it very difficult, I understand, for them to troubleshoot what actually happened. Something else I want to point out is that on the Outage Committee webpage, so this is the Outage Committee webpage on the 911 Task Force website. If you scroll down to the bottom, there is an outage guideline document here. This is the one that Kimberly Culp helped put together for the Outage Committee, and the Outage Committee did some proofreading on. And I thought I had a link to our new document, but apparently I do not. So I'm going to have to I'm going to have to research what happened to that and fix that on the web page. But if you come back to this page in a day or two, you will see a link to a new document that's called, it's a best practices and lessons learned document. There is a link to it in the standing report. So in the meantime, that's the easiest way to get to it. But 911 outages, lessons learned, and best practices. And what this document is we've been looking at all of the special investigations we've been doing as an outage committee into the outages that meet certain criteria, such as duration of 4 hours or more, multiple PSAPs affected, details of the outage were unclear from the report, those sorts of things. So there's a whole list of them up here as to what qualifies an outage for a special investigation. And then based on the results of that investigation, any best practices or lessons learned are then listed down here in the main body of the document. And we've got them broken out into best practices for the BESP, best practices for PSAPs, and then even a third category of problems identified by the outage committee that are partially or completely out of control of either party. It's not something the BESP can necessarily fix, and not something the PSAPs can necessarily fix. So that's a third category that we have there. But this document will continue to grow and change as we do more special investigations. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at it. Like I said, the link is in the standing reports document, and I will also add a link to it on the outage committee page. And that's all I have for the outage committee.
Well, this is Carl. Daryl, thank you very much. Do you want to go ahead to the reports committee since there's no prepaid collections report?
Sure. So our next report from the task force to the commission is due in July. That means there's no report to approve at this meeting. And sometime in July, I also hope to have the first draft of the commission's annual State of 911 report to the legislature ready for input. And they'll be going out to the reports committee first for an initial review. After the reports committee has provided me their feedback, I will be updating that and sending it out to the full task force, as well as a number of other statewide public safety associations as required in statute regarding that report. So be watching for that.
This is Carl. Daryl, thank you very much. And if anybody has questions so far, I haven't been asking that. Let us know. Or raise your hand. Next item is EZNet user group. Kimberly?
Thank you, Carl. This is Kimberly. So for an update, we have over 90% of the PSAPs migrated over to the EZNet. The pending PSAPs should hopefully be wrapped up by the end of this month, with maybe a few carrying over to June. The few that may carry over to June will be our bases and also State Patrol. So hopefully they won't extend beyond June. And some outstanding issues in the EZNet. The issues are simple to complex items. The simple items, at least it's simple from probably the user's perspective. It's ordering of equipment and installation of that equipment for Boulder and Arapahoe County. That's been pending for months on end. So we're hoping that that'll get wrapped up this week. And we also have anti-alley migrations, Douglas County, PSAPs in Fremont, again, hoping that that gets wrapped up soon because those items have been pending for quite a while. From a more complex issue, we have transfer issues, Summit and Vail. They all may be PBX related, but Lumen does support their CP equipment, and the migration over to the EZNet has amplified those concerns. So we're hoping that it can get resolved shortly. They've been working diligently on it, and I would say all parties have been engaged. We also have a more significant issue, and that is routing issues in the EZNet, where calls from out of state are being delivered to our PSAPs, and that is a network issue. It is not a line of sight issue or something that is configured wrong in a cell tower. This is a PNE issue, and calls have truly been delivered from a different state in the wireless network to our PSAPs. So we've engaged Lumen, sent over data on that information, and we're hoping that it'll be resolved soon. But we've asked Lumen and Intrado to be proactive in this, so not just look at the documentation we've been able to provide on these routing concerns, but somehow get in and take a look and double check all of that information to fix it before the next misroute occurs. So if you have a routing issue in your PSAPs, please don't just write it off as, well, that was a weird anomaly. Really take a look at that and and evaluate that misroute. And if you feel it's something that is just can't be answered, you can't see that there's something wrong in the Annie Alley or a tower configuration, please send them over to the EZNet team so we can have eyes on it and make sure that Lumen is diving into the issue. As Holly already mentioned, for the next step on the EZNet, Holly did present to us about the request for text to go across the EZNet. So it is a universal offering for everybody in the state. So data is flowing through the EZNet, not just voice. And there's definitely some pros and cons on the path forward. So the discussion is great. The EZNet the group is going to explore the delivery of text, and there should be a survey coming out just to dive in and get some more questions answered from all of the PSAPs and authorities. I do want to encourage all PSAPs and authorities that are on the call today that have not adopted text to really think about why and what roadblocks you have, and how the EZNet group, the task force, the resource center, how we can all help you remove those roadblocks. There really is no cost to you because we have PSAPs authorities in the state that is willing to take on those text calls. So from a cost perspective, from a personnel perspective, we have folks that are wanting to just get it done and get your area over on text to 911. So we're willing to do all of that work. So please just consider of moving this forward so we can improve our accessibility. We are also looking at reporting. So as indicated in the written report, we have some reporting concerns. Lumen offers Clearview reporting, and that's in their partnership with Intrado, and it just hasn't been meeting the mark of being able to extract data out of the EZNet. So next month in June, we should be having a presentation from the Intrado Lumen team on ECATs for just the EZNet portion of the reporting tools. I have no idea if we would be able to move over to ECATs, but we're at least going to look at that functionality and then further our discussions. That's all of my updates for now. Does anybody have any questions for me? All right, thank you.
This is Holly. Daryl, can you stop sharing the screen? People are not able to see the interpreters when the screen is being shared. Unfortunately, Google Meets makes all the videos disappear when you're sharing the screen, so it makes it really hard to see all the videos. Thanks.
Holly, this is Kimberly. Would it be helpful if we turned on the captions as well?
This is Holly. Each individual can turn on the captions on their end and see everything. So I think that's up to the individuals. If they want to turn them on, they can on their end too.
Right. This is Daryl. And something that might help is if you can find the video with the interpreter, each individual has the ability to hover over that and click pin to screen, and that will put the interpreter, it'll keep the interpreter video on your main screen.
Yeah, this is Holly. Unfortunately, when you're sharing the screen, I can't even find their video. I have to go into the participant function and find their name on their list and then do it that way. I don't know why Google's doing that today. I think we're good to move on though.
This is Carl. Kimberly, thank you very much for your report and also everything you've done with the Usernet or EZNet user group. Our next item is GIS committee. Matt.
Hi, everyone. We've been having discussions with Rich Kelly at 911 Data Master to put together another what, how, and why GIS presentation with respect to NG 911. Daryl, Rich might be a good candidate for that GIS panel that you mentioned earlier. And then the only other significant issue at this time, or not issue, but something to point out, is that Intrado is now offering free NG 911 GIS data readiness or validations to PSAPs and authorities in Colorado. They're They're currently working on a form for a web page and a URL for you to submit your requests to get those GIS data validations. So we hope to have that from Intrado soon. And when that comes out, we'll send that out to the list. That's it.
This is Carl. Matt, thank you very much. Next item is Colorado Public Safety Broadband Update. Ed Mills.
Hey, thank you. We have been working on governor initiatives, and I can only keep it on a high level right now. And as you know, governor submits his budget, and then what the legislature does with it is another thing. But as it relates to PSAPs, we've, as I talked about at the PSCS, our office believes it's very important that we have redundant paths to our PSAP centers, and so we've put money in for that. We've also requested some money for bridging LMR to LTE so that when we have coverage gaps, we can use that just as another resource. We've also thrown in we've asked for money for mesh type network assets so that we're not dependent on, as a state, we're not dependent on other companies or agencies that will have a cache of those. And then one of the other things that's kind of important is, and it relates to that, is whenever we have big wildland fires or big incidents, we need either cell on wheels, cell on light truck, or cell on a trailer. And so we've asked for some money to put together a fleet of that. And we took it from kind of a Department of Homeland Security emergency management perspective and ask for assets in the 5 districts so that if we need to, we could pull all those together at one time or another. Hopefully in the next month or two, as the initiatives get put out there and as they make their way through the process, we'll be able to go ahead and say some more and keep you in the loop. I will once again say that if you need any help getting in touch with Starlink, if you want to look at that as a potential redundant path, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I will get you in touch with them, set up a meeting. And Carl, that's about all I have for today.
Ed, this is Carl. Ed, thank you very much for the report. And I definitely agree that Starlink's a good thing to look at, especially for some of us in the rural areas that may only have one one backbone for internet.
Yes, sir.
And then next item, PSCS report, Deanie.
Good morning. Just a couple things. The PSCS recently had the radio summit virtually on May 5th, and that was a very successful summit. Even though we weren't able to meet with each other in person, we had Dr. Nicoletti speaking on mental health, wellness, and resiliency. And we also had Daryl Branson speak and talk about give an update for Colorado 911. And that's always good info. And we also had the opportunity in our last meeting to hear from Mr. Antonio Martinez, who is the new director of the broadband office. And one thing of note, he advised that he's very focused on Colorado broadband in rural and underserved areas. That would be for broadband capacity, higher speed, new coverage. I guess he's quite interested in that and very focused on that as he's from a rural area of Colorado. And that will be all. And one last thing, we haven't had any updates with our FirstNet user group at this time. Thank you.
Carl, thank you very much for the report. Holly or Daryl, just because of the stuff in the chat, is there a better way to maybe identify the interpreters or a quicker way to find them for the people that need them?
So this is Holly. The interpreters can either change their names, or I can give you the names. The names are Elizabeth Jesse Warren and Marcy Murphy. So if you're looking for those interpreters, Elizabeth Jesse Warren or Marcy Murphy. But if they're able to change, I think you can change your name on Google Hangout the same way you can on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, I think
I
they
had
were able
tried
to
to change the name and I couldn't figure it out.
This is Holly. Okay.
This is Jeff. I don't believe you can change your name like Zoom. Did you see my note in the chat, Holly, about how to pin the interpreter?
This is Holly. Yes, the problem is they weren't even able to find the interpreters at all. I wasn't able to either. Somebody had to sign out and sign back in, and then they were able to find the interpreters' names. But I think we're okay now with Elizabeth and Marcy.
So maybe in the future, we could just do a quick note in chat of who they are so they don't get lost. Thank you.
That's good.
Next item. Go ahead, Daryl.
I just said that's a good approach.
Okay. Next item is SWIC update. Lynn.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I guess it is still morning. Just a quick reminder, the electronic version of the Colorado Field Operations Guide is available online on the App Store and on Google Play. This is a list of all sorts of frequencies that your radio techs might use out in the field to set up some communications. You can just search CO EFOG and download the app to your device. That will make it readily available for you. On October 6th this year, I'll be conducting a communications exercise. This will be in conjunction with the quarterly State Emergency Operations Center exercise. And this is where I'm coming to you folks from the PSAP perspective, the 911 Task Force. I would welcome and encourage any PSAP that wants to participate to let me know. We'll be happy to set up a way to evaluate different means of connecting to the State Emergency Operations Center, whether that would be through your emergency manager or directly to the state EOC. We'll be evaluating phone, email, web EOC, and radio connectivity to the state EOC. So if you or your agency would like to participate, please send me an email. It'll be in the minutes or the notes as well. It's Glenn, Glen, .Kleich, Klaich, at state.co.us. Or give me a call at 303-918-1131, and we'll work out the logistics. We'll have a couple of planning meetings between now and October when we get that set up. So I would certainly encourage as many PSAPs that want to participate and do something a little bit different. We'd be happy to help work with you on that. From the alerts and warnings side of the house, we have IPAWS accounts now set up with Clear Creek County and Sedgwick County. Those should be ready to go live within the next few weeks. We're also working on revitalizing Kit Carson County's IPAWS. They've had a change in leadership in the sheriff's office. So if you or your agency or county still doesn't have local IPAWS launch authority, please let me know. I'm happy to help you through the process. Carl, do you want me to touch on the DTRS potential move from OIT? I'd be happy to talk about that if you'd like.
This is Carl. Yeah, Glenn, I think that'd be a good idea.
Okay. Just for a little historic perspective, for those that don't know what's been going on, late last year, based on the governor's directive, the Office of Emergency Management, which currently houses the state DTRS or Digital Trunked Radio System, they were asked to reimagine IT. And as they went through the process, they felt that state radio didn't fit best with OIT. So there was an effort underway to get it moved. Initially, they were looking at moving it to the State Department of Transportation. Well, public safety folks got wind of that and asked Executive Director Stan Hilke from the Department of Public Safety to intervene and at least slow down the process so this could be evaluated a little bit better. So the executive directors of OIT, Transportation, and Public Safety got together and appointed a steering committee with representatives from each of those agencies, along with CCNC and the PSCS, to do a study. So they have the steering committee. We conducted a survey last month to gain stakeholder input as to where they thought the state radio system should be housed. We also had a representative from OIT surveyed state agencies to gauge interest on what agencies were interested in hosting the state radio system. Partway through the process, the Department of Transportation dropped out. They just expressed that they were no longer interested in hosting it. And the only state agency that did express an interest in hosting the DTRS was the Department of Public Safety. It doesn't change the responsibilities that we on the steering committee have, and that's to come up with a solid recommendation as to where that the state radio system should be administered or housed. Looking back at the previous annual reports from the PSCS, each year for the past several years, they've asked that state radio be moved to the Department of Public Safety. So it kind of fits in with what we've been thinking. The official recommendation has not been made. We're still evaluating that. We had a meeting on Tuesday this week with some of the stakeholders that participated in the survey and asked to speak to the steering committee. We have another one of those meetings coming up next Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. If anybody would like to attend and meet with the steering committee, shoot me an email. Again, it'll be in the notes, or glenn.kleitch@state.co.us, and we'll be happy to hear your questions, provide you some answers. And our time frame at this point is we hope to have a draft of the recommendation by mid-June, have that finalized by the end of the month of June or the first part of July. We will be getting input from PSCS and CCNC as far as whether to get support for our recommendation, and then it will be up to the executive directors. Let me just preface one thing here, clarify. Moving it from OIT is absolutely not an indictment of what's being done at OIT. They do a terrific job of administering the radio system, but with the direction from the governor to rebuild state government to the most efficient and effective way, we will be supporting it in that regard. But again, it's not an indictment of what OIT is doing right now. And in fact, any change that happens, we hope and want it to be completely invisible to the end user. So your field personnel, your dispatchers won't even notice that there's a different agency administering the state radio system. And with that, I'll wrap it up, pending any questions. All right, well, thank you for your time.
Ms. Carl, Glenn, thank you for your report. Next item, Division of Fire Prevention Control report. Nothing new to report. Next item, Colorado 911 Resource Center, Monica.
Yeah, so quickly, I had submitted my report a little prematurely. I thought we were going to have Moffett and Lake County transition to a text solution. Pitkin County, Moffett successfully has transitioned and is offering text. They have not yet taken on Jackson County. We're looking at some other solutions. But Pitkin is still working on trying to take on Lake County's text to 911 calls for service, but they have run into some technical challenges and they're working through those. Monday the 3rd, we hosted the virtual 911 Goes to Denver event. We had 59 people tuned in. We've sent out the meeting materials and the recordings to the Colorado listserv. And I also this week just sent out a survey that I'm hoping that everybody who attended will respond to. One of the things that's kind of been under the radar is the Resource Center keeps working with the Office of Behavioral Health for 2 solutions. Working with the model that Denver 911 has created with their STAR program, offering mental wellness resources to respond to incidents in the community. And then secondly, what behavioral health is working on is training materials for the 911 community to train their staff on how to deal with mental health challenges in their community, in addition to mental wellness resources for themselves in the profession, in the 911 profession. So we continue to work together. They have some grant dollars that they're willing to spend to get some of those materials to us, and I will keep everybody up to date on that. The ECC roundtables, we've made it through the supervisor job template. The last PSAP or ECC job template we're looking at is the manager and director job template. And I just continue to find different opportunities for folks out in the vendor community or in the training space to come and speak to our operations folks to help them find new solutions for their operations. And that's really all I have, Carl.
This is Carl. Monica, thank you for your report on, I thought the 911 was Denver was very well. I learned some information on that.
Thank you.
So I'm sure people that aren't as involved probably learned quite a bit. And thank you for everybody that submitted reports. Our next item is old business. Are there any items for old business? Seeing none, anything for new business?
Hey, Carl, this is Daryl, the other Daryl.
Go ahead and congratulations.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to mention, period. Wanted to let everybody know that this is my last meeting. I will be retiring at the end of this month. One of my coworkers did step up, and I've been working with him for the last couple of months on everything from the 911 side. So the name you'll see pop up would be Nick Huffman, and he's on it today, that he will be taking my place. It's been great being part of this task force. I've been on it almost from the beginning, and we've all definitely seen a lot of changes over the decades.
Daryl, this is the other Daryl. Daryl, how many years do you have in?
34 years and 2 months, not that I've counted.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. This is Carl. Daryl, yeah, definitely congratulations. You'll be missed. I'm glad you saw the foresight in getting somebody involved early. It seems like sometimes that is missed. So that's definitely much appreciated, as well as everything you've done for us over the years.
Thank you, Carl. Appreciate that.
Any other items for open discussion? Daryl, we're running quite a bit ahead. Is the lunch presentation ready, do you know?
I do not see Mark on the call. Mark Collier, are you here? I do not see him. And you're right, we've got through this agenda in record time. I'm wondering if I can try to contact him and see if he can come back, but maybe we should just tell people to be back at noon, because I know he'll be on by then, and join the presentation at that time. This is an important one. This is on telephony denial of service attacks. It's very important that people have a plan for what to do if your PSAP becomes the focus of one of these attacks. So I would really, really encourage everyone to not just go away and not come back, but if you go ahead and sign out, make sure you sign back in by that time to join the presentation. Does that sound like a good plan, Carl?
This is Carl. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good plan. That'll let people grab something for lunch. And I think I agree. It's definitely an important topic.
Okay, great. So I'll let Mark know that we have adjourned early, but we're asking everybody to come back at noon for his presentation so that if he comes back and we're not on the call, he'll know why.
This is Holly. I also wanted to mention that originally the people utilizing interpreters stated they would only be available till noon. So the interpreters will not be back for the 1 o'clock presentation, just for the folks on the call who may be utilizing interpreters.
Thank you, Holly.
So do we still want to continue until noon, or do we want to get them on sooner?
I don't know that we can get him on sooner. I'm gonna reach out to him, see if he can get on, but I don't.
Then why don't we?
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to hold everyone. I think we should go ahead and adjourn, and I'll just let him know that we will hold it at noon as planned.
And then do we need a motion to adjourn, or can I just adjourn?
We usually don't go back into session after the presentation, so it's good to go ahead and get the motion and second to adjourn now.
Okay, this is Carl seeking a motion to adjourn.
This is Vicki Pickett. I so moved.
Matt
Deanie
seconds.
should.
Or Deanie.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Vicki, Matt, and Deanie. Anybody opposed? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Please be back at noon for a discussion.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
I think we could either stay logged in or just come back, just log.
Kelly, I think if you want to go ahead and get started, that will work because we can see the whole slide, even though we're seeing the PowerPoint stuff around it.
Okay. All right. Very good. So certainly appreciate everybody's time today. Daryl asked us to come on, and what SecureLogix is we're a vendor that has a call security and trust solution. So what we'll talk about today is really our service and our software and service that we provide to many enterprise customers, including many city counties and a number of PSAPs. But the call security we provide through a voice firewall and intrusion prevention, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the trust is an authentication piece. We have a new solution called Orchestra One that allows us to look at additional information about inbound calls to verify the phone number that's being presented is valid, or identify if that phone number has been spoofed, and look at other risk factors. So, we've been doing this for a long time. We've been in business for 20 years, providing these kind of capabilities to enterprise customers. And we've also got some very strategic partnerships. So first of all, we have partnerships with all the major US carriers. So AT&T and Verizon both resell our solution. We also have integrations into their network that we utilize to help authenticate calls. We have a similar relationship with T-Mobile and Sprint, so that as calls are coming into your environment from one of the major wireless carriers, we can reach back into the carrier network and confirm if that phone number that's being presented is valid, if that call is really on their network. And then we've also got strategic relationship with the Department of Homeland Security, where we perform a lot of research that's funded by the Department of Homeland Security around the latest tools and techniques that hackers and fraudsters are using against voice networks. And that's going to be a big part of the presentation today. Mark Collier, our CTO, will do that presentation, because a big focus of that research is around next-gen 911 and what the hackers and fraudsters are doing against those environments. So wanted to start off with a use case. We've got, as I mentioned, a large number of city counties, many of them that we cover and protect the PSAP, and many of them became customers because of an attack like this. And I'll first talk about the specific attack, and then I'll talk about, we've actually seen this type of attack across many different parts of the U.S. So basically what happened is this particular county got hit with a TDOS attack, a telephony denial of service attack. It's where hackers attempt to flood a bunch of unwanted calls into an environment to try to disrupt that environment. And in this particular case, all of a sudden the county got a huge number of calls into their 10-digit administrative lines. And after a certain number of calls came into that, the way they had their system set up is some of those overflow calls would get sent to call takers within the 911 environment. And so some of those calls started getting answered by the call takers. And this attacker created a unique situation so that when the call taker would answer the phone, they would be put on a conference bridge, and they would be talking to other call takers from other PSAPs across the country. And of course, that created confusion because the call taker is answering, thinking they may be talking to somebody with an emergency, and they're saying, "What's your emergency?" And then they're on the line with other call takers, and none of them want to hang up because the last thing they want to do is not service someone who's got an emergency. So it really caused confusion and interruption. And they just continued, the attacker continued to launch large number of calls in here. So they were tying up, not only causing the confusion with the call takers, but they were tying up all the lines that the county call center would use to communicate with the fire and police via mobile phones. And so, for a period of time, they couldn't get any legitimate traffic inbound or outbound from the area. So Verizon actually contacted us. We got with the customer. We were able to do an emergency deployment overnight and got the system up and running. Our system includes a voice firewall and voice intrusion prevention system. So very quickly, we could see from the traffic that the calls were coming in from 3 phone numbers. And so we implemented a firewall rule in to block calls that were coming into that to those 10-digit administrative lines from those 3 phone numbers. After a period of time, the hacker realized they no longer able to get their calls through, so they changed to another set of phone numbers. Very quickly the system alerted us to, hey, these are the calls that are making, or these are the phone numbers that are making all the calls. And again, we started blocking them. So after about 3 attempts, the hacker just went to another victim, we assume, because they stopped hitting this customer. So we were able to identify and stop the attack, and then moving forward, able to help protect this environment. As I mentioned, we've actually seen this across a large number of cities and counties, unfortunately, in the U.S. And so we've got a number of customers that have been hit that we've now protect in the DC, Maryland area, a lot down in Florida, but it's really across the country. But many times the attackers use the same technique in the signature, where they create this conference bridge and they're putting them on conference bridges with other call takers. Also recently, we've seen a couple of even more disturbing situations to where in one case they compromised a PBX in a local hospital, and they configured that PBX, the phone system of the hospital, to start dialing 911. And so that was contributing to the attack. And then more recently, we were brought into an attack in California where the hackers seemed to figure out how, through voice over IP, to make calls into the actual 911 lines. Because we worked with the FBI and the DHS, Department of Homeland Security. They've identified that at least some of these attacks are coming from overseas in the Middle East. And so that's why they believe that's why the attacks were coming into the 10-digit administrative lines, because the attacker, even though they're in the Middle East, can make a phone call to a 10-digit line and hit whatever lines they want in whatever part of the country. But previously, I don't think the hackers understood how to make a call that would come into a 911 on a 911 line. And unfortunately, it looks like they've begun to understand how to do that. Another thing that we've seen with some of our customers, as well as the FBI, is these attackers are beginning to communicate via Facebook and other ways to communicate with some of the city and county victims. And the attackers are threatening that they've got additional capabilities, and they're going to planning even bigger attacks. And one of the concerns that the FBI has is, God forbid, if they did an attack like this and coordinated it with something like the Boston Marathon bombing, where you had a situation to where you needed to get first responders out to an area, but there was this disruption in the midst of that same time period, disruption around the PSAP, it would really be a dangerous situation. So, there's what we've seen with most of the customers where we've deployed is the majority of that the hacker doesn't come back to, but we have seen a couple of situations to where, after 6 months or so, they'll try it again. But we've been able to identify and stop, the attacks, because at this point, all the majority of them that we're seeing are still coming in on the 10-digit administrative lines. And they try to do some creative stuff. All of a sudden they'll start using phone numbers that are from an area code that are from another part of the country. And so, there are ways that our system can identify unusual traffic patterns, and that if you normally don't get calls from a certain area code, if all of a sudden you're getting a bunch of calls from an area code, the system can send real-time alerts. So I want to jump into just a few slides on the system itself, and then I'll turn it over to Mark for the research side. But if you think about how we designed our system, everybody's familiar with data networks and the fact that all organizations, whether it's a company or a government agency, has deployed certain tools to protect against hackers from getting into their data network. So they've deployed firewalls, intrusion prevention, and authentication to protect against things such as DDoS and man-in-the-middle attack and social engineering. So what our system does is we've applied those same concepts to the voice network, because now so much of the attacks can be coordinated and are coordinated through a voice over IP. Is, that, as I mentioned, TDOS instead of DDoS. TDoS is similar to a DDoS, but the attack comes in as phone calls. So our system is really deployed at your perimeter, and we're monitoring as calls go in and out of the organization. And then we have the call IPS or voice IPS that looks at unusual traffic patterns or trends. We provide this solution as part of a service where we manage it for you. So we'll deploy the system, let it run and see what your normal traffic patterns are into and out of your organization, and set up thresholds so that anytime there's something unusual, the system will send a real-time alert. Our managed service team will investigate that, determine what's happening, coordinate with the right people in your organization to get approval, and then we can implement policies, and those policies are implemented through the call firewall, and it could be blocking certain calls, could be redirecting calls, could be sending real-time alerts. We also have what we call our red list. This is an attack signature list of phone numbers that have been used for these kind of activities across our hundreds of enterprise customers. And what we see is many times they'll use the same phone number and try attacks at different organizations. So that's proactively updated. When we see an attack at one place, we proactively update the database for all our customers. Usually we see same phone numbers trying to be used at another customer. But by the same token, these fraudsters and hackers rotate the numbers quite a bit. So usually within a couple of months, we no longer see those particular phone numbers being used for this kind of activity. And at that time, we'll take the phone number off the list. So the overview of our system is really, real-time monitoring and ability to take action on both inbound and outbound calls. The voice firewall and intrusion prevention are part of what we call our call defense system. And then the Orchestra One is our call authentication service. And I'll talk about how each one of these works. So I mentioned the managed service. This is really most of our customers for city county. We manage the system for them. So we're able to, help set up the proper type of protection and IPS rules and firewall rules, and then help respond in real time. This is just a quick list of some of the city counties, but as you can see, it's really across multiple states and counties. And, in each case, we establish a specific relationship and service for that particular county or city based on their unique environment and really what they see on a day-to-day basis. So talking about the system itself, and I've just got this in one other slide, and then I'll turn it to Mark. As the call comes in, the first thing that we do is with the call defense, the voice firewall and IPS, is we look at those phone numbers and phone calls and the patterns of calls, and determine, is that call part of an attack? Is it part of a robocall campaign? Is it part of social engineering? Anything that might not be related to your mission or your business. And then, before we implement any policy to block or redirect a call, we would get approval from the appropriate people on your staff. But then, absolutely start protecting your environment against non-business related calls. And then for any call that you want to get additional information for, we can run it through our call authentication service. And the next slide shows more details on that. But we have basically 2 levels of authentication with Orchestra One. We have standard authentication and advanced. So standard authentication is where we're looking at all the information we can about that phone number. And is it a valid formatted phone number? Has it been allocated to a carrier? There's a lot of information in the SIP header that we look at. And then for advanced authentication, we utilize the APIs or the connections to the wireless carriers. So we do have a real-time connection to Verizon Wireless, to AT&T Wireless, and T-Mobile. And T-Mobile, with the recent acquisition of Sprint, also covers calls from Sprint. So that means anybody calling into the environment from a Verizon Wireless device or AT&T or T-Mobile or Sprint, we can then hit the API with that carrier to confirm that that call with that phone number really is calling into your environment at this time or not. And then as a result of the analysis from our Orchestra One, we provide a score for each call. And it could be from -5 to +5. So -5 means we know that phone number is spoofed. +5 is we've confirmed that phone number that's being presented is valid, and everything is appropriate based on the information that we've gotten and the confirmation from the carrier that that is the call that you're seeing come in, and then that allows customers to make decisions on what they want to do. So, for example, we've got some customers that if it's a +5, make sure that's a call that you want to take as soon as possible and in consideration with the rest of your queues. And if you're in the midst of a huge number of calls and you've got calls that are -5, maybe send those to specific agents, call takers that are trained to handle potentially fraudulent situations, or put it in lower part of the queue. So my last slide just talks about how the Orchestra One works. As I mentioned, we've got standard authentication and advanced. The standard are things you see in the green here, and the advanced are the different APIs we have with the different wireless carriers. But a call comes in, we take information about that call from the SIP header, we send it up to our Orchestra One call authentication, and we run it through these tools. So like I said, the first database we look at is that phone number a valid phone number in the North American numbering plan? Has it been allocated to a carrier? And what type of device has that phone number been allocated to? VoIP, wireless, or landline? Then we look at information in the SIP header. There's a lot of information there, and determine if anything looks suspicious or everything looks valid. The next thing we look at is stir shaken. This is a industry initiative that the FCC is really pushing to create a situation to where you have a digital token to confirm that the phone number that's being presented is valid. This is not implemented yet, but the major carriers are all indicating they're going to embrace it and they're working on it. In order for it to work, because it's an IP-based token authentication process, the call has to start on SIP, which is voice over IP, and remain on SIP and get delivered to your environment on SIP or a voice over IP environment. So we're not seeing any calls with these stir shaken tokens yet. We believe we'll see them later this year as more and more of the carriers upgrade their environments and have an ability to support this. But it'll be another piece of information that'll be important to help authenticate calls as the industry moves in that direction. The next thing that we look at is porting information. Has that phone number been ported from one wireless carrier to another recently? Because that's always potentially fraudulent if that happens. And then, of course, the carrier APIs. So I know I've covered a lot of information. One other thing I wanted to mention before I turn over to Mark is, as I've described, our current production solutions are about protecting calls into your 10-digit administrative lines. Mark and his team on the research side are working with Department of Homeland Security, the ECD, on what we could possibly do for calls that come directly into 911, and Mark will talk about that. But, so far, we don't have any customers that are ready to block an inbound 911 call. But as you'll see, Mark and his team have done a great job of establishing visibility and being able to show some additional information as calls come into 911. And through those research projects with DHS, we have some pilot projects that Mark will talk about, where we're providing some capabilities and visibility into calls coming into 911. So any questions before I turn it over to Mark Collier? All right, Mark.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so Kelly, obviously did a brief introduction to the TDOS and robocall issues we've seen recently in public safety, and most recently 911. And I'll add a little bit on that, and talked a little bit about our current solutions. What I'm going to do here is talk a little bit about some near-term research that we're doing with DHS. DHS has a science and technology directorate, and what they do is they fund vendors and universities and others to kind of address security issues that they're seeing out in the field in their area of interest, which includes public safety. And we're also working with CISA, and I apologize, there's an extra I in that CISA there. But CISA is the operational component of DHS that provides cyber for DHS itself, the entire federal government, outside of the military and intelligence community, and then selected critical infrastructure verticals such as public safety, 911. And then the ECD, or Emergency Communications Division, is the component of CISA that is the most interested in public safety. So we've got funding from them and are working with them to address, these TDOS and other issues that we see out there in the field. One of the things we do is we're trying to track the latest threats. So we've been, doing our best to monitor the activities of who we believe is one actor. Maybe it's a group of people, but, as Kelly talked about, this individual was initially hitting law enforcement and county organizations, generating robocalls, and then also trying to find numbers that get transferred to call takers to try to tie them up. And one of the things we've seen recently, and Kelly mentioned this, but I want to drill in just a tiny bit more, is that most recently he's figured out how to directly hit 911. And that's very concerning. And, we did a little bit of prototyping with DHS a few years ago. We didn't publish the results because we thought it would be foolish, but you can take a voice over IP service like Twilio or Vonage or many different voice over IP services, and they are required to allow 911 dialing. So if you get a bunch of VoIP phones from one of these hosted providers, 911 dialing, it costs a little bit more, but you can get in there, you can pick a number, you can pick your location, and there's generally no checking. So what we think he's doing is he's taking advantage of one of these 911 services, grabbing some numbers, setting a location, and then when he makes a call from across the country or the world, it goes to the PSAP associated with that number and location. So we think that's what he's doing. We're actually going to do some more work to try to mimic the attack he's doing so we can try to understand it. But and we'd be happy to report the results in a confined setting. We never put this out in the public because we don't want to arm anybody to do this. But the quick summary of what I'm saying is that his techniques have improved. It's certain he's figured out how to directly hit 911 through voice over IP, and he's also compromised local PBXs like at hospitals and law firms. So we don't know if his intent is just to be mischievous and annoy organizations like yourself, or if he's planning a much larger attack where, you know, he may conference in 50 PSAPs across the country, and instead of generating onesie twosie calls, generates many. You know, that's our fear. So I don't want to sound too alarmist. Hopefully that never happens, but from the signatures we've observed, it seems like he's improving his sophistication. So you know, certainly something to stay aware of. Moving on, we're working on several separate projects with DHS. One is to improve our ability to continue to improve our ability to identify when the calling number is spoofed. Conversely, when it's authentic. So, you know, we're doing research to improve that Orchestra One solution that Kelly talked about earlier. We're also conducting pilots. DHS is funding us to deploy this new, you know, our new research prototypes in the real world to validate they work properly, that they do it indeed detect attacks and don't generate false positives. So, you know, we're working with Palm Beach County in southern Florida, which has kind of been a hot spot for these attacks, Greater Harris County in Houston, Texas, and then King County up in Seattle. And we might be looking for additional pilot partners. I don't know if that's the case, but if some of the things that we're describing here sound super interesting, there might be a way to participate in a future pilot, but that's TBD. Next, we're building a modeling tool. So one of the challenges is, you know, most organizations haven't experienced a TDOS attack yet. So, you know, what you would actually do if you got hit by a significant TDOS attack, you know, you probably have to be dealing with it for the first time live. So we're building a modeling tool where we could take in, for example, one of your networks, model it, generate different types of TDOS attacks, different volume, et cetera, different signatures, and then let you play around with different treatment, you know, drop calls, route calls to different PSAPs, maybe corral calls to specific call takers that know how to quickly triage suspect calls, and sort of practice and maybe even train your call takers to deal with an attack if it happens. So that's an additional tool that we're building that, you know, we would love to work with some pilot partners to get feedback and make sure that's useful. The last project we're doing is, of course, NG911 brings in additional communication types. You know, you've had text for a while, but it includes text, it includes images, it includes video. So what sorts of threats are introduced by adding in that multimedia data? For example, could you launch a disruptive attack with text, for example? You know, is text a better way of doing TDOS, or can you embed malicious code in a video, or can you generate a video that is the next generation of a swatting attack where, you know, it's even more effective in deploying resources, or maybe it's misdirecting resources to another location so you can do something nefarious at a different spot. So that's a brand new project, but the goal is twofold. One, looking at multimedia data, and also working towards a concept that DHS has called EC3, where, you know, they want to collect information from states or regions or maybe even the entire country and get sort of a global view of what's going on so that they can assist organizations like yourself. So say, for example, this guy who's doing these conferencing attacks, what if he attacked 10 states and 20 PSAPs? Well, you know, you have visibility in what's going on at your site. You don't have visibility into what's going on somewhere else. So if they have that sort of visibility, perhaps they could get in and better assist different organizations in dealing with that attack, you know, based on a more global view of what's going on. So that's a quick summary of the actual projects we're doing. And we're implementing we're basically building prototypes on top of our production product, testing them at pilots, getting feedback, and then, you know, rolling selected capabilities into our production systems. So this kind of gives you a glimpse into, you know, what we'll be doing in the future. And please, if there are any questions, please stop me. So Kelly, please go to the next slide. So this is sort of an architectural diagram of what we're building. We put some elements into an NG911 network. We might place them into EZNet as shown here. There are pros and cons of that. Or we might move them down into like a customer data center or PSAP where, you know, they're in your environment rather than what is perhaps an outsourced EZNet. We don't really care. The solution could be deployed either place. We've done that with, you know, different models with our pilot partners, but you know, we put in two elements. One is a passive SIP probe that lets us get access to all the data. We can put in another element where we can do call control. We haven't done that with our pilots because they're not ready to do that, but it is an option. And then, like Kelly talked about, those elements at the premise, either in a PSAP or maybe a data center that you control that's supporting multiple PSAPs or an EZNet. The premise elements send call information to that Orchestra One cloud service that Kelly talked about. That's where we do all of our sophisticated, you know, spoofing detection, authenticating the call, detecting TDOS, etc. We send results back so the element on the premise can use that. And then we also send it to a dashboard so that a PSAP or EZNet managers can sort of see all the traffic and be aware of a TDOS or other attack if it occurs. And if there are no questions, go ahead and jump to the next slide, Kelly, and I can always come back. So as far as a dashboard, what we've chosen to do is we've been working with Intrado and their ECATS dashboard. So rather than build an entirely new dashboard, we've elected to modify one that's relatively commonly used across 911. So they've taken their dashboard and they've modified it to have various visualization elements. So this is a real dashboard in the sense that it's an actual structure from Palm Beach County. So they have 18 PSAPs. So and we could do a demo of this in the future. It's a pretty cool demo. I'm just set up today to show it statically. But the idea here is that if that region had a significant TDOS attack that was affecting multiple PSAPs, you see the global TDOS level across the region in the top middle. You see the impact to the various PSAPs in kind of that middle area. On the left, you see geographically where the calls are coming in, and there's, you know, different colors and other things based on, you know, how severe the attack is. And then on the right, you can drill down and look at the actual calls and our scores and so on. So, you know, the idea here is, and of course, we've generated a very significant attack here, so it lights up everything, right? A real attack might only affect one PSAP or whatever. But again, the idea here is a visualization tool so you can see what's going on. see how severe it is, who it's affecting, and maybe drill down and try to understand what's going on. So, you know, that's kind of a summary of what we're up to. And, you know, we'll be continuing to enhance this architecture to, again, look at content, to aggregate data across multiple PSAPs and regions, and then, you know, additional capabilities in this dashboard to try to help organizations like yourself understand what is going on. So that's a quick summary of what we're doing from a research point of view. And when I say research, you know, it's, you know, our goal and DHS's goal is to build things that we can get out in the field in a 1 or 2 year time window. So this isn't just pure research that'll never see the light of day. The goal is to do this work.
Kelly, if you're still speaking, I think we've lost audio.
So yeah, that was Mark speaking. I wasn't sure if it was my audio. This is Kelly.
How long, Kelly, how long was I out?
You were probably out about 30 seconds. You were really just talking about that this is research that DHS wants us to get out into the field within a year or so.
Yeah, okay. So that's a summary of what we've been seeing in the field, a summary of what's in production now, and then a summary of, you know, what we're doing with DHS and kind of a glimpse into what you'll probably see, or at least portions of this, in our production solution in you know, sometime in the coming short, you know, years. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. Are there any questions for either myself or Kelly?
So Daryl, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say I saw Daryl indicating that he did get my email with the slides, and Daryl, you're welcome to share it with all the task force members as well.
Great, thank you. Vicki?
Well, I may have missed this part, but I'm assuming that the monitoring for this would be like writing on the EZNet, or where would it sit exactly in the network to do this?
So that's a great question. There are pros and cons, right? A capability like this embedded in an EZNet would have the advantage of maybe, you know, dealing with an attack as early as possible. The other advantage is, you know, that's kind of a choke point for multiple steps. So we support that deployment. The challenge with that is we've yet to convince some of the EZNet providers that they should do this. And I think we're going to find outsourced EZNet providers, this is just my opinion, a little slow to maybe treat a call. You know, it's my view that they're probably going to want call treatment pushed towards the actual PSAPs. So in practice, we've deployed this more. Let me give you another example. So in Palm Beach County, they have a centralized Intrado call processing system. They also use Motorola for some things, but they have a central Intrado system in a data center, like I show in this picture, that serves all 18 PSAPs. So in that case, we weren't able to get the EZNet provider to install in their network, so we installed in the data center. It's all SIP, it's all voice over IP. We can put our elements in either place. We even have pilots where we put them in the actual PSAP. It doesn't really matter, but there are, you know, obviously pros and cons of putting it over in the EZNet versus putting it on the customer side. Technically, we can put it in either place. there's visibility advantages and scaling advantages to putting it in the EZNet, but I do not see the EZNet vendors wanting to actually terminate calls if they see an attack. So in a case like that, it may be necessary to put it over on the customer side in a data center or the actual PSAP, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
And, you know, we have another pilot partner that basically has created their own EZNet because they're large and, you know, in a position to do so. So in that case, we sort of have it in their custom EZNet. Another we have in a data center and another we have in some of the actual PSAPs.
Great question. Anybody have any other questions? So Daryl, this is Kelly. You know, as Mark mentioned, you know, we can demo the research build with the interface to ECATS. We can also demonstrate our production solution that protects the administrative lines. So, you know, if anyone's interested in learning more, or, you know, just want to even share information or have us, you know, talk in more detail about, you know, some of the attacks, we're certainly available. So, you know, Daryl, in the email that I sent you, it's got my contact information. You guys can reach out to us. We'll be happy to you know, provide any additional information you may want, or even, you know, demonstrate how the system would work in an environment.
Terrific. Thank you. Any other questions for Kelly or Mark? Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Monica, are you still on the line?
Me, Mark? I am.
No, Monica.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, I am. And we will be starting the Resource Center board meeting at 1 p.m. straight up.
And that is a different Google Meet address. So I'll put that in the chat for anybody who wants to join us for the Resource Center board meeting. Thank you, Mark and Kelly, and we'll see everybody else later. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.